I'm not crying, you're crying. Okay, I'm crying a little bit. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of the season finale of Star Trek Picard in Arcadia Ego Part 2. Whew, got there in the end. Yes, we have finally reached the end of the first season of Star Trek Picard, and it is, of course, incredibly bittersweet. So first things first, as always, I'm going to give you my spoiler-free review right up front, and then we'll go into the scene-by-scene breakdown of this finale. And right up front, spoiler-free, I have to say that this finale pretty much crystallizes everything that I love and everything that I'm disappointed with. And I don't want to say hate, because I don't think there's anything that I really hate in this season, but it encapsulates everything that I love about the show and everything that I'm disappointed with in this season of Picard in a singular episode. There are things that so incredibly, I don't want to say frustrate me, just moments in this episode that I just wish I could have felt more if it had just been built up a little bit better or had been paid off a little bit better than it actually is, because none of the ideas that I'm frustrated with are bad in any way. It just doesn't feel as powerful as it could be. But then there are moments in this episode, especially in the last 15 to 20 minutes of this finale, that I think are truly, truly transcendent, truly beautiful, beautiful moments that had me crying in tears. And not just moments with, and this is a mild spoiler, with characters that we've come to know and love in previous iterations of Star Trek, but there are moments with characters in this finale, and especially in the last 20 minutes, with the new characters that we've come to see and know and really love this season of Star Trek Picard, that I think just show how really rich these characters are. And it really has me very excited to explore and go out into the galaxy more with them in the next season of Star Trek Picard. And I just think there are so many heartwarming moments, again, especially in that last 20 minutes, that I just think are really beautiful. And there's stuff in between those two extremes, between my disappointment and my love, where there are moments with the plot of this episode that I think the plot is not bad in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that the plot of this episode there's nothing that I have a problem with, really, other than a few things here and there that I'll get into in my spoiler section. I just think all of it was kind of a bit predictable. I think everything that you expect will happen in this finale pretty much happens, and there's no major surprises in terms of plot development. I don't think anything is going to be like, oh my gosh, I am so shocked that happened. But none of it's bad by any means. But it really just sets up these really beautiful character moments in the end. And again, also there's some frustrations that I have here and there in the episode as well. And that's really about all I can say without getting too deep into spoilers. I've already kind of said a couple tangentially spoiler things in my upfront here, so apologies on that. But ultimately, I think this is a good finale that has some truly great moments in it. But ultimately, like the rest of this season of Star Trek Picard, doesn't completely live up to its really wonderful potential. I think there's a lot more that could have been drawn out with these ideas that are present, but ultimately doesn't get as much power out of them because it didn't take the time to really get us there. But ultimately, none of it is bad. It is a solid finale, but then you get some moments of pure grace. Pure grace. If anything, the last 20 minutes of this episode are a true love letter to Star Trek, to the fans, and to this season and the characters on Star Trek Picard. You just have to get through some good, solid, but not transcendent stuff. And that's my spoiler-free section on this review of the finale of Star Trek Picard. So if you haven't seen the finale yet, pause it here, go on CBS All Access. It is free currently. Use the code GIFT. This is not me saying I'm not a CBS All Access affiliate. Literally, you can get it for free. Patrick Stewart tweeted out. So if you haven't seen Star Trek Picard, use the code GIFT right now, and you get the whole month free. And go watch the finale and all that stuff. I'm just letting you know because get free stuff. It's cool. We need positives in this world right now. Now, before I get into my breakdown of the finale scene by scene, just one quick housekeeping item. Tomorrow night, or actually tonight, this Thursday, I am going to be doing a live stream at 6 o'clock to do a live discussion of the finale and Star Trek Picard as a whole with all of you guys. So if you're watching this episode or watching this review on the day of Star Trek Picard's finale, that's Thursday, come join me at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and we'll have a little fun drinking some wine and talking about the finale. Don't know why I did that accent. It's a thing that I'm doing. I'm not stopping. Just gonna keep going. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. All right. So now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, it's time to talk full-on spoilers about this episode of Star Trek Picard, the finale. All right. We start off the episode with a really cool teaser for Star Trek Discovery Season 3 with Burnham holding that Federation flag. Yeah, I know. I just have to say it was part of the episode. It was even before the previously on, and it was super cool. I'm just very excited for Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Anyways, actually getting into the episode. So we get Narek sneaking into the Borg Cube, and I'm going to put this right up front here. While there are developments that happen within the plot of the Borg Cube, I'm just going to say this right up here. The Borg Cube does nothing this episode. There are things that happen on the Borg Cube, but really could have happened pretty much anywhere, and the Borg Cube doesn't really contribute in any way, shape, or form to the plot of this episode, which really just goes to show me, and I'm going to put this right up front because I want to put my disappointments right up front so that we can talk about the really beautiful things at the end of this episode here. It really just goes to show me that the Borg Cube really... they just didn't know what to do with it. There are some really, like I said, really beautiful ideas, like the XBs are a great idea. Seven becoming the Borg Queen again was a really great idea. It coming to rescue them in the end of last episode, or beginning of last episode, was a really great idea. And here it does nothing. Just is a place where action happens. And that's, again, just ultimately one of my big problems is it's just not paying off this really beautiful idea that they have. And it makes me wish they had saved it for Season 2. Where you could have done a whole season delving into the XBs and how we treat Borg and the mistreatment of the Borg. I think it's just sad that it was kind of wasted here, and that's one of my biggest disappointments with the finale. Is just there's really nothing that happens with the Borg Cube here, or the Borg storyline in general. It's just a place where stuff happens, and that's ultimately disappointing. So I'm putting that right up front, just to put it out there because I don't necessarily know where else I would put it. So Narek sneaks into the Borg Cube, and we get a really kind of nice scene with Elnor and Seven. I really like that the show is sort of building out the Elnor and Seven relationship, especially given how this episode ends, where it looks like Seven's going to be a continuing part of the show, which I'm so excited about. But I like that they're building out that relationship and that they kind of have something going on there in terms of a friendship and a mentorship. And Elnor saying, I would miss you. It was a very sweet moment. Then we get Narissa and Narek sort of meeting up, and again, here's another disappointment that I have. It's I don't care about Narissa and Narek, mostly because they spent the whole season kind of backstabbing each other and Narissa being kind of a jerk, and we never really got a sense of any depth of emotion. And there's a really great scene here where Narek sort of says, I was the one that managed to find this planet. I did it. I was the one who failed out of the Jat Vash, and I managed to get this. And you get this sense of his finally feeling like he's proven himself. And we've gotten a little bit of that between Narek and Narissa throughout the season, with her being you're not good enough, you can't do it. But it was so one note, and there was no depth to their relationship beyond incestuousness and her just insulting him. So this moment where they kind of have a nice tender moment where she's acknowledges that he's done good and lets him go off to do his thing. It just doesn't read as well because I don't really have a strong emotional connection between the two of them, other than Narissa just hating him. And I wish we had gotten a bit more nuance in the relationship to make that scene read powerfully, because again, it's a great scene, just hasn't been built up to. And I apologize, I know I'm kind of harping on this. I promise you I will get to some really beautiful things in this episode. I promise you it's not all negative. So it's just getting some of my disappointments out of the way first. Also, one quick thing to mention here that I forgot to mention when I was actually filming is why was Narissa on the Borg Cube? I thought she had beamed away at the end of episode 8, I believe. It made it seem like she was on the Romulan fleet at the end of that episode. So it was just kind of weird that she was still on the Borg Cube, and it confused me for a hot minute. Again, not a big deal, but just kind of strange. I guess I could believe that she beamed somewhere else on the Borg Cube. Just weird choice. Then we get a scene where Picard is sort of beautifully looking at a butterfly that'll sort of be sort of symbolic thread throughout the episode. And then Soji shows up, and Soji basically, Picard has this really wonderful line where it's like, failure, to believe that you don't have a choice is a failure of imagination, and saying don't let them, the Romulans, turn you into the monsters that they believe you to be. These are really good points by Picard, and I think really are the really like saving grace of the earlier parts of this episode. Like, I think that thematic tie is really wonderful, of like him trying to lead by example, him trying to show that you don't have to do this, you don't have to become radicalized in order to respond to this. And I do love that there's nuance of like Picard may be wrong in that, and that we kind of got that last episode, but here it's a really just a good repetition of that theme. Then on La Sirena, we get Rafi and Rios basically fixing the ship. And here's another one of my disappointments, and I think it's going to be my last major disappointment with the episode, so stick with me. Again, I'm sorry that I'm kind of harping on all the negatives up front. But we get Rafi and Rios. It's a wonderful scene where they're sort of like playing off each other, joking, and we get the like use your imagination ocarina tool that Saga gave to Rafi last episode, and they magically use it to fix the ship. And it's sort of like this catch-all device that can do whatever is needed. MacGuffin's the wrong word. It's a magic device that can do whatever they want. Yeah, it's not a MacGuffin, because MacGuffin's something that everyone's like after, and so it's not really a MacGuffin, but it's just sort of a thing that lets them do whatever they want. And I'm just disappointed that I knew it was like going to set up so they could do something later on in the episode, and I wish they had just given it some more specific rules than like, it's magic. It's space magic that the synths made up, so it can do whatever you need it to do in the moment, because it's cool. And so it was a nice character scene between Rafi and Rios. I like the jokes and like they're ribbing each other. But I just, the use of this device was unfortunate. All right, then we get a quick scene with Jarate and Soon sort of showing up and being like, it's really nice that you're a mother and you're like doing the right thing. And then Jarate's like, I'm not a mother, and storms out. And we know that she's gonna like go and try and like sneak around and do some stuff to release Picard and all that stuff. I guess it was sincere, because Soon turns out to be like a good guy at the end of this episode. But it read to me that moments like Soon's just being like kind of a jerk and being like, well, it was a good thing you're being a mother. I'm like, oh, he's so being a jerk in this moment to Jarate, but I guess he was being sincere. It was just a strange performance by Brent Spiner in that moment. Then we get Narek throwing rocks at La Sirena, and I actually really enjoyed all the scenes with Narek and the La Sirena crew as they kind of work together. As much as I don't believe that Narek really earns a redemption, I don't think the show like shows us him earning redemption, but it makes sense that he would take this opportunity to like go stop the beacon. He's not really becoming a good guy so much as like he would want to stop the beacon because it would destroy all organic life. So it kind of makes sense that he would want to team up with them to get things done. And I thought there were some really funny moments and interactions between Narek and the rest of the cast, to the point where I almost wish Narek had been able to interact with this cast earlier in the season instead of sort of being like shoved off on the Borg Cube, because there's really some fun stuff here, like Elnor saying like, I don't like you, and sort of Rios being like, you're throwing rocks at my ship, I could shoot a photon torpedo at you, and Narek saying like, I have grenades, I'm throwing rocks. I thought was just some really fun interaction here, and again, just has me disappointed that Narek hasn't got a lot of time to play off of these characters, because I think that's just a lot more fun overall, and kind of makes his character, again, not redeemed, but it's just a more enjoyable interplay between all of them. And like I said, Elnor shows up and they have a meeting, they come up with a plan, kind of reminiscent of Stardust City Rag earlier in the season, where they basically come up with a plan and like intercuts with them executing the plan at the same time. I liked how it worked out in Stardust City Rag, because it showed a little bit of Rafi's character and how she sort of masterminds everything, and there was some like fun little interplay going on with like Rios doing some stuff and Picard showing up. That was fun. Here, it doesn't work as well for me, just because like it's set up, payoff, and there's no like intrigue or necessarily any tension, because we kind of have them just showing up and doing the thing that she's saying that they're doing at that moment. It wasn't bad. It was just sort of like, okay, yeah, that's what you're doing right now. So it didn't work as effectively as Stardust City Rag, in my opinion. One scene that I did really love here that I want to touch on before we get further is I did really like the scene where Narek sort of describes the Romulan backstory of why they believe that Soji is the destroyer, because that was sort of a hanging thread of like, well, they kind of had this admonition, but how do they know that Soji was the destroyer? Why do they think that she's the Sheneb, as they say? And it makes sense that like because she has a twin and it's maybe the ones that they know about, that they would sort of like place that story onto her and really believe that she's the destroyer. There is a little bit of connecting the dots a little bit too much, like maybe like why did it have to be Soji? But it makes sense to me that like if they're so fanatical about this that they would automatically like, oh, there's 2 twin AIs or synths that we're aware of. Well, of course they're the destroyers. That makes sense to me, and I kind of liked this sort of building out of their backstory, and Eric saying like, this is the reason why I believe this stuff. It's history for me, and history repeats, and kind of setting the stakes a little bit within the episode, and kind of filling out that Romulan backstory a little bit, and kind of playing off the fact that Elnor also is a Romulan as well, and doesn't necessarily believe the same stories that Narek does. So I thought the scene was maybe a little bit too late. I wish we kind of gotten that story a little bit earlier in the season, because we kind of assumed all of it at this point. But it was a nice little scene in and of itself. But it could have come earlier in the season, I think, because, again, it was sort of all presumed. Then we get a scene with Jarate basically sneaking Picard out. We get another really gruesome eye stuff. There's really a lot of really gruesome eye stuff in this season. And actually, something for all of you to know, I know a lot of people have had like a lot of problems with like all the eye like imagery, like Icheb getting his eye pulled out, and then in this episode we got literally get the like gross eye being put up to the scanner. And then we also get some eye imagery with the XBs with like half their eyes being taken out, and also 7 of 9 having her eye. And something that was pointed out to me that I thought was really cool is the name of this planet, Corpalius, the planet that Synthville is on. I don't know the exact details, but it does have to do with I believe a Greek myth. I might be wrong on that. Let me know in the comments. But some ancient myth that has to do with like the creation of like artificial intelligence, or like a different type of life. Not artificial intelligence, but like a different type of life, and it has to do with like the left eye and coming out of the left eye of this character. I need to look up the exact myth, but it's nice to know that while this like eye imagery is pretty gruesome, there actually is like mythological ties to it. It's not just like, let's just show all this eye stuff because we have some weird thing against eyes. There's actually like a mythological reason for it, and I like that sort of subtle tying into mythology that Picard has been doing this whole season. I think there's a lot of like interesting mythological ties, like the names of Sutra and Jera. I forget Sutra's sister, the other like Soji-looking AI. There's like a lot of little like reference to the mythology throughout this season, and I think it's just nice little subtle ties like that. And it played out in a really gruesome way, but kind of cool to see. And we get Jarate basically breaking Picard out of his home arrest, which, you know, was fine. It was an effective scene. It worked for me. And then we get Soon basically learning that Sutra betrayed them, and then him teaming up with Rafi, Rios, Narek, and the gang to try and stop Sutra and Soji from activating the beacon. They go there, Soon deactivates Sutra, and the gang basically fails at stopping the beacon from being activated because Soji basically turns on them and she throws the bomb away and is going to activate the beacon. This is a little bit frustrating. It was nice to see them like try something, but it really felt like they were trying to give them something to do, because ultimately nothing really comes out of it other than Sutra gets deactivated and Soon joins their side. But ultimately their efforts failed, and it doesn't really move the needle in terms of any plot development. So it was just like, yeah, here's something for this crew to do because we really have nothing else for them to do in this moment, which is a bit frustrating and disappointing in that moment. But then here, finally, is where I think this episode just starts to get into higher gear. And I think as the episode goes along, it just starts getting better and better. And here's where I think it goes from like, okay, solid, to getting good, and then we'll get to where it gets great. So here's where it gets good. Picard basically starts piloting the La Sirena, and all the stuff of him piloting the ship is just so much fun. Like, I know Jarate's kind of playing the Tilly role, like saying too much, talking too much in these moments. We get a like Picard's like, I'm trying to pilot a ship, like, give me a minute here. And I liked the moment of, like, again, tying into this theme of Picard saying, like, they need to learn the lesson that they can do better. They can live better. Like, life is a responsibility. And how do I teach them that? Well, by leading by example. And that's why he takes control of the ship. That was a very Picard thing to do, and it read really well to me. And that's a moment that I think really started elevating this episode in my mind for me in that moment. And that brings us into the actual action of the episode, like the big battle fleet stuff. And I think there's a lot to love within this battle. The Romulan fleet shows up. We get some cool maneuvers, like the Orchids show up and get some cool like firing on the Orchids. Apparently they have like, it says like begin planet sterilization number 5. So they have at least 5 ways to sterilize a planet, which is kind of funny that they have that many ways to do it. I feel like just shooting a planet with your 5 billion Romulan ships that you have would be plenty. But then we also get some fun bits with Picard. While I didn't love the like magic synth thing that they had, allowing them to like do a Picard maneuver number 2 and also calling out the original Picard maneuver, which was like a fun little Easter egg and played jokingly very well. But I liked the ship like sort of having all these copies and being like a moment to distract them. And then Picard saying like, I'm giving you my life. I'm fighting for you. I'm trying my best to save your life in hopes that you will learn from this and do the same thing in return. I thought was just a really like nice encapsulation of that theme in that moment. And Picard basically almost getting shot and kind of failing here, and the Romulan fleet is about to fire on the planet, and then we get what everyone basically predicted was going to happen, which was a fleet of Starfleet ships show up with Captain Riker at the helm. And we get our first look at the first Starfleet ships we've gotten in this episode. I didn't really catch what the new class of ship was, but they look very Sovereign class. And we get a first look at the 24th Century Bridge, which is a very CGI bridge. It looked cool. I'm sure the Trek Yards people and like the people who love like analyzing ships and things like that will have a lot of fun sort of looking through all the screenshots and enjoying that. This is one thing I did have a problem with, and this is a problem of everything kind of ever since 2009 Star Trek and the Abrams movies, is that everything kind of just has like grand sense of scale. Like we got like 1 billion ships here, like 1 billion Federation ships, 1 billion Romulan ships, and I don't necessarily need that many ships. Like that's more ships than we saw in the entire Dominion War were on screen in one of the fleets here, and it was sort of like, I guess, to create like a sense of stakes. But honestly, I would have been fine and I would have bought it if there was 10 ships. If there were 10 ships on screen and like 10 Romulan ships showing up to fight them versus like maybe they had like 1 or 2 Orchids and there were like 10 Federation ships that showed up, I would have bought that because that would have felt more realistic to me. Just like having a bazillion Federation ships felt like way too much, and it doesn't ruin anything for me. It just like this tendency ever since 2009 Star Trek to be like, let's just make things bigger, and that'll make things more exciting because they are bigger. And I don't necessarily think you need that. I think you can have like smaller scale stuff and still have the same level of stakes in it. But like I said, it doesn't necessarily take away from anything for me. It was just like, yeah, there's a lot of ships. Whew. And there was a little bit of copy and paste there. There was a lot of the same amount of ships. And also thinking about it does take away from this whole idea that like the Mars, the like attack, like destroying the Federation shipyards was such a big problem. But apparently they can make like 1 billion ships. So that read a bit wonky to me there. But again, it doesn't really take away much from this moment. But it's just like, that's a lot of ships. And I just don't necessarily need that grand a sense of scale going on here. But what it does allow for is a really great moment with Riker just showing up and being like, yeah, you want to fight me? Fight me. I can totally take you on. And we get this really great moment that really, like, it warmed my heart, where Picard calls Soji and it's like, Soji, turn off the beacon, because if you, like, this is what we're all about. We are here standing up for you because we believe in you to make the right choice, and really showing the Federation doing what the Federation does, trusting in people. And trusting people to make the right choice. And Picard leading the way there. And Riker leading the way there too. I thought that was a really beautiful moment. And we get like this sort of like beam to the sky, because we need a beam to the sky. And the like AI synth stuff coming through, which I hope gets followed up later, that there's like a creepy alien race living in like the nether space or whatever that is. And that wants to kill everybody, that we're just gonna like hope no one bothers to call again. But I hope that gets followed up in some way, shape, or form. But I guess like it like opens a portal to them, which felt a bit weird. Like I would need some of that explained to me, but whatever, it's fine. She calls it off. I think it works well enough in terms of the actual like emotion and thematic thread that they're trying to play, like Soji learning to like trust in others and trust Picard, something that she hasn't been able to do because of Narek. So I think working on a character level, I think it works really well. I will say during this fight sequence, we get Narissa doing something on the Borg Cube. I don't really know what she was planning to do there. And Seven showing up and fighting her and kicking her off and saying this is for Hugh. This was a fine fight, and I'm glad that Hugh gets a little bit of justice here, but we didn't really have many scenes, or I think any scenes, between Narissa and Seven, so their fight between each other felt a little bit hollow, in terms of, like, they didn't have any, like, on-screen presence before this to build off of, but I did enjoy the fact that we get a little bit of retribution for her killing Hugh in the end here, and we interpret that Seven and Hugh had a relationship. Again, something that I wish had been built up a little bit more, and this is again a common problem in Picard, is that there's these great payoff moments to moments that we didn't see. And I wish we had gotten a little bit more of a relationship between Seven and Hugh, or any on-screen relationship between Seven and Hugh, to really make her moment of avenging him work a little bit better. But that being said, getting some vengeance for Hugh worked well enough for me. So then we get the Federation fleet leaving and kicking the Romulans out. We get a really wonderful scene between Riker and Picard. Riker saying, of course I'm always going to be there for you. I'm always going to have your back. Echoing what the relationship is or should be between Soji and Picard eventually. Riker and Picard have always fought for each other, have always been there for each other. And that's what Soji needs to learn, that people will have your back if you have their back. And so I like that sort of echo of the relationship. And I liked the moment where when Riker leaves, Picard says goodbye. And you just get this really wonderful moment from Patrick Stewart where you realize that he thinks he's just said goodbye to his friend for the last time, because he knows he's about to die here, because his illness is sort of taken control. And he realizes that he may have just said goodbye to Riker for the last time. And it's just a really small, subtle moment on Patrick Stewart's face, but it really hit me, of him just feeling that moment of saying goodbye to Riker. And I'm glad that Patrick Stewart found that moment there. And this is where I think the episode goes from good, where there's some good thematic themes in here, despite some problems that I have with the minutia of stuff. But everything from this point on, I think, is where this episode gets great. So again, that curve of this episode going from okay to good to truly transcendent, because we beam down to the planet and Picard dies surrounded by all of these people. And while I didn't think Picard was going to die, check out my video from earlier yesterday where I had the theory that Picard was going to go into the synth body, and that ultimately turns out to be true. So I didn't believe that he was dead, but I did feel it for a moment. They played it very well, and I was like, I'm feeling this, despite I know it's not going to actually be the case that Picard is actually dead, that they're going to Star Trek Into Darkness this with the Tribble blood in a way. A little bit better set up than Into Darkness, but not completely. Then when we come back from the commercial break, I think we get the best scenes in this episode and some of the best scenes in all of Star Trek Picard. First off, we get probably my favorite scene in the whole episode between Seven and Rios. And I think their moments together are really great, of Rios saying, I promise I would never do that again, Seven saying the same, and Rios saying what? And Seven have this moment killing somebody just because it felt good that they needed to not exist in the world anymore. And I like her admitting that. I liked her admitting that she was a murderer and that she killed Bjayzl earlier in the season, and that killing Narissa kind of felt like the same thing, maybe a little less in cold blood. And then Rios, and hopefully that'll be a character development that we'll see with her going forward, because clearly she's going to be sticking around for the rest of Star Trek Picard, at least going to be in the beginning of Star Trek Picard Season 2, which I'm so happy about. There's something else I'm happy about that we're going to talk about in just a second that I'm very excited for. And then we get Rios having a really wonderful moment, letting a captain into my heart. And I thought that connection between the two of them in such an interesting way, so well written, such a beautiful moment. And then we cut to the moment that really hit me, was Eleanor going up to Rafi and both of them breaking down, crying that Picard was dead. That moment really, really hit home, because again, I know that Picard wasn't going to actually be dead, but the two of them crying, those actors are just so good, especially Michelle Hurd. They play it so well that I was like, oh, I cannot help but getting hit by this. So I think that those two scenes just were really, really wonderful. And I think it shows in these few scenes right here, along with Alison Pill's wonderful acting in previous episodes, the previous two episodes, that these actors on this show, between Jerry Ryan, Santiago Cabrera, Alison Pill, and Michelle Hurd, these are some powerhouse actors. All of them are giving their A game in this stuff. Every single scene with all of them, they just find all the subtle small moments. For example, with Jerry Ryan wincing at the alcohol, or Santiago Cabrera just smiling when he thinks back on his old captain and thinking of Patrick Stewart. I just think all of these actors are just so amazing, and that is saying something when they're going up against Patrick Stewart, of all people. Like, he is one of the best actors of our generation, and for these actors to not only live up to him, but to just stand out on their own in so many scenes, especially Jeri Ryan, who is just truly amazing in everything she's in this season, just goes to show me that, like, these actors are just fantastic, and we are gifted with their presence in Star Trek, and I'm just so excited to see them in future seasons of this show. But then we get one of the most transcendent moments in all of Star Trek Picard, and is the moment where Picard wakes up in his old study, and he gets a moment and sits down with Data. And this scene between Picard and Data, I truly loved. Like, there's so much to talk about there. Like, Picard talking about, like, how he's dead, and them connecting, and them talking about Data's death, and Data asking us, like, did you feel bad about sacrificing your life? Then why would you think that I would feel bad about sacrificing mine? And it was just a really wonderful connection between these two characters that we came to love, and them, like, saying in a way goodbye, and also saying I love you, like, actually expressing platonic but deep, profound love for each other. And again, I talked about this last episode about, like, a platonic relationship between, like, a guy and a girl, between Rafi and Picard, that I thought was wonderful, that we don't always get to see, but we also don't really get to see two men expressing deep love and, like, explicitly saying they love each other on TV often, and I'm so glad that this scene exists. It was shot so beautifully, it was done so well, and we know it was leading to Picard coming back. But I liked that Data asked him to let him die. I don't know. As much as there's been some wonkiness in this episode to get to this point, I think this scene was one of my favorite scenes in definitely the show, and I think one of the most beautiful scenes in all of Star Trek. Right up there with, like, I think right up there with Spock's death in The Wrath of Khan. Is it as well earned as the death of Spock in Wrath of Khan? No. I wish we had a bit more of a better way to get to this point, had been built up a little bit better. But in terms of the actual scene itself, I think this goodbye to Data is the goodbye that we did not get in Nemesis. If you had slotted this scene into Nemesis and him saying goodbye there, I think it would have made that movie so much more powerful, and it makes this episode so much more powerful. Just a great scene between Patrick Stewart and Data, and them really just having a moment. And for us as the audience, getting a true chance to say goodbye to Data. Not Brent Spiner. It looks like Brent Spiner will be sticking around maybe for next season, or at least we know he, like, exists as a soon out there. So at least we can know Brent Spiner could show up from time to time, and I guess Lauren B. Ford do exist as well. But we're saying goodbye to Data. And I thought that this way to do it was wonderful. And Picard getting back in the synth body, and them holding a funeral for Data, and Data listening to Blue Skies as he fades away, I thought worked very well. And that moment really, really gut punched me. Was it as well earned as it could have been? Like I said, I know I'm repeating myself a little bit. Probably wasn't as well earned as it could have been, but a wonderful scene in and of itself. Also, with Data and Picard expressing love for each other, that means Dck Card is real! I'm sorry, audience. Please forgive me for that. And then we get Picard coming back to life. We learn he has a synth body, which, by the way, I guess means they now cured mortality, which is funny considering that, like, Data had just talked about, like, not living forever. And they sort of say, like, oh, Picard's just gonna, we've cured his disease, and he's going to, like, have the same number of years that he would have wanted. And there's some funny little beats there, like, 10 or 20 more. If you really think about the logic of it, functionally, they've cured mortality, but, we'll just sort of gloss over that. Then we get the setup of the crew of La Sirena going off for a new season of Star Trek Picard Season 2. And we get, like, all the characters, like, playing around and having fun. And we get Rafi and 7 of 9 holding hands, which I am taking as official confirmation that 7 is bisexual or maybe she's found out she's a lesbian at this point, but she sure as heck is into the ladies. And I know it's not verbally stated, but that is confirmation enough for me that she likes to get it on with the ladies, which has me so happy. I know I made a video earlier that they didn't make it explicit, and I wish they still had they can still make it a little bit more explicit, but given that in season 2, I'm sure they will do a better job of that. Like Michael Chabon has even said that they kind of developed the characters' sexualities throughout the season and are planning on making it more explicit in the next season, which I'm very excited about. But the fact that 7 of 9 is basically confirmed to be bisexual at this point, I am so fine with, and I know they haven't had much stuff between them, but I just liked them holding hands there. I was so happy. So I am so down with that, and I really loved the whole crew lining up and going out into a new adventure, which hopefully will be a little bit better than this season. And I'm just so excited for the next season of Star Trek Picard, and I'm glad that this season ends on a wrap up of the story rather than sort of a cliffhanger that will keep us going into the next season. I like that it sort of finishes out here. Alright, so to give my final thoughts on this episode, and I'm going to be giving my final thoughts on Star Trek Picard as a whole in a whole season-long review later on in a week or two, where I'll be sort of looking at the whole series as a whole. But I think just looking at this episode, having just watched it, and thinking about it here, I think, like I said, there are things that really frustrate me, not because I think they are bad. I don't think there's really any bad choices narratively in this episode in terms of the plot beats that they have going on, except for some plot convenient stuff, which frustrates me, the magic synth fix-it tool and the fact that they just can save Picard's life with the synth. That feels a bit convenient for me, but otherwise I can move past it. No, the things that really frustrate with me in this episode, I think, were just there were so many threads that you could have pulled and could have set us up better to have the payoff that we get here mean so much more. The battle between Narissa and Seven could have been much stronger. The moment between Narek and Narissa could have been much stronger. The fact that the Borg Cube wasn't utilized at all. The fact that we had 1 billion ships and you could have pared it down could have been a little bit better. So there was a lot of more frustrations with the fact that moments in this episode were good, but weren't building off of stuff that had been properly set up. So I think that that's where a lot of my frustration with this episode comes down to. But on top of that, I think the theme that this episode was going for of you have my back, I'll have yours. If we start to trust each other, we can do more things. And the fact that was played out in microcosm with Soji and Narek's storyline of Soji kind of not wanting to trust anybody, but then finally coming around to trusting Picard in this episode in the moment when it really was needed and when she really needed to just see people standing up for her and standing up for synthetic life, I thought worked well. Again, could have been drawn out better, could have been done better. And I'm not going to sit here and say that this was the best perfect ending to a season ever. I mean, I have major problems with it, but I do think that the theme was decently executed, and then it allowed us to have some scenes that maybe not properly earned as much as they could have been, but some scenes that were really truly transcendent and really truly hit me hard. And what this shows me ultimately is that next season, what I hope, and I'll talk about this more in my full season-length review, is that I hope that they take the 10 ideas, the 10 really great ideas that they have, because I think they had so many great ideas this season, pick 5 of them, and just focus on those 5, and then put these characters who I've come to really, really, really love this season, and put them through those 5 ideas, not these 10 ideas, and kind of consolidate the storylines a little bit more. And I think we are set up for a really, really, really great season of television. So ultimately, I think that this finale is just an encapsulation of everything that I think about Picard. A show with truly transcendent moments, really brilliant ideas, really great scenes, but ultimately not enough follow through on all the ideas that they had on the table, which ultimately leaves me feeling frustrated with a lot of them instead of really loving the 5 that they could have given us. But again, I'll leave that for my overall season review. But that's my review of this finale of Star Trek Picard Season 1. I'd love to hear what all of you think about it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you get frustrated with it just like I did? Were you not bothered by some of the things that I had problems with? I'd love to hear all of that down in the comments below. Don't forget, I'll be doing a live stream tonight at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, talking about this finale and like going over it with everybody and having some fun. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel or get to my Patreon if you could. It would really, 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 really mean a lot to me. It would really help me out if you could give over my Patreon and help me do this more full time, especially right now during all the financial craziness. It would honestly be a help. But regardless of if you subscribe, get to my Patreon or comment, I'm just glad that you stopped by and we had some time talking together. And I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons: Eli Berg-Moss, Stephen Schuthart, Boyd and Marybeth Earl, Michael McGee, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Enar Sigurdsson, Marika Kwiechin, Munir Amlani, Mari Nekar, and Polly Mina.